one of the things in my training, one of my professors just challenged us with is he said, before you can actually care for a person, before you can actually like really connect with a person, you have to earn the passport to travel in their life a little bit.
Welcome to Follower of One, where faith meets real work. We're a global community helping others move one notch closer to Jesus. Wherever you are, that's your mission field. You are a missionary. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Follower of One podcast. My name is Addison Williams, your host, and I am very excited to have a special guest, a great friend of mine that I met through the Faith and Work movement, Drew Schmitz, the executive director of Little Cloak out of the Carolinas. Drew, it is a pleasure as a family man, as a friend to you, to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Yeah, it's awesome to be on here, Addison. It's been a lot of fun being able to follow you and what you're developing here, and love the opportunity to be able to share a little bit of what we're doing with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very small world. I would say we met through faith-driven movements, but then we found a love and a passion and similar interests. We love the outdoors. We love cracking jokes. And
Yes.
also we love baseball, which I believe you have one at your desk right now.
Yeah, I got my Cactus League baseball that I collected from a foul ball when I was living in Phoenix, which is seems like ages ago. It was just a couple of years ago we were living there, but now living in Charlotte, North Carolina.
I love that. Well, welcome from the Carolinas. I'm currently recording this podcast in Texas, so we can be friends from a distance today. Would love for you to first shape, what does Little Cloak do? What do you do with the organization?
Yep. So, as you said, executive director, I'm leading this organization. What we did is we actually started as an organization over 10 years ago now with one company, and that one company we just developed a care team. We were looking to develop chaplains for that organization. But that company, they had about 300 franchises across the United States, and the practicalities of trying to put a chaplain in every one of those locations was just unfeasible. At the time, I was actually in Chicago. I served as a pastor for over 20 years. And so one of the congregants there working with that company came to me and said, "Hey, can we talk about what this would look like to start a care team within this organization?" And came up with this idea of a virtually based chaplain organization. So we're 100% virtual, and we provide our care just like this, where you're on a screen connecting with one of our care professionals, and we provide that to about 23,000 employees across the United States. We're in every state in the United States, and have our chaplains available. You get on the platform, really, really simple process where you could connect with one of our chaplains tonight if you needed someone to talk to and to process it. Everything from mental health to emotional health to spiritual things, and just trying to do a better job of bringing access to care. And
Mhm.
so as that grew with that one company over the last 10 years, we expanded and actually, as I shared, we went 2 years ago, we went and started bringing this to more and more organizations. And that's been my spearhead of as executive director, is developing this and expanding this. And God's been really, really faithful in doing that. And so I've enjoyed bringing that care, making it more accessible, simpler, confidential, and a place where, number one, companies can just really care for their employees well and get access to really good care easily.
Absolutely. I think as fast as the United States and globally, people are coming into the workforce, it's essential that we have a place that we can go to plug in, especially because so many organizations now are traveling, people are going places. There's a lot of remote work. So I love the framework that you provide to allow employers. I love also that you're able to really help construction companies. Whenever we talk about, construction, there's a lot of travel involved with that, or people in the oil field that go places, pipeline workers. It's a really creative thing that you're doing. And so I just applaud the work that you're doing to think chaplaincy in a new way, and
Yeah.
also thinking of things in a new way. That's actually why Follower of One exists, which is why you're also on the podcast, because the tagline of what we say from our organization standpoint is missions reimagined. And it actually takes place in your place of work, whether that be virtually and or in person. So as you came into the faith and work world, I'd love to frame this conversation from your perspective, not only as an entrepreneur, because you're leading as an executive director in a sense, but also as a pastor, because I think as a pastor, this conversation is very unique because you see it from a business lens, but you also see it from a pastoral lens. So I would love for you to start the conversation today in why you think faith in the marketplace is so important.
Yeah, and it's been quite an endeavor to make the change, Addison. From I was all I knew really was ministry. I came out of college, went to seminary, and went right into ministry. Served for 15 years with a megachurch in Chicago, and spearheading their largest campus, and then actually going to a church in Phoenix and lead pastor there. That church grew and multiplied, and so leading that and being on the front line of that, and then God just kind of taking our family and taking us and moving us, relocating us here to Charlotte. There's a lot of kind of personal pieces that were there, a part of God just transitioning us here, and then stepping into this role in the business world. It is one of these pieces, and this is what resonated with me so much about Follower of One was just this opportunity to think about how our faith and how the gospel comes to bear in the workplace, and not as, and I think this is the biggest piece for me as a pastor, is it's not a dichotomy. It's not like two separate things. And that's the danger of what, in some ways, even I would say, I thought as a pastor for 20 years, I looked at my work in ministry as sacred work. And then here comes owners of businesses, here comes people who are employees on the front line, managers, directors, and they come and they sit down, and I'm gonna help encourage them to go do their secular work out there. And it created a false divide. And I think I would say it was really hard for me to understand what it was like for entrepreneurs, for business owners, for employees to go out in the workplace. And so I would talk about that, even, Addison, get up on a sermon on Sunday and say, are you going to forget this by the time you get to Monday? Well, now that I'm in it day to day, you're going to forget it by Monday, because it's not always there in front of you. There's so much things that you're working through. There's responsibilities. And so it gave me a new understanding and a new passion and heart to see us endeavor into this conversation of, no, the sacred's not happening on Sunday. The sacred's actually happening every day of the week. And
Yeah.
we're participating in that, and we're carrying that in ourselves in some ways. But there has to be a huge amount of intentionality. And I imagine that, for a lot of individuals who probably listen to this podcast, interacting with this, a lot of the business owners that I interact with, they have such a heart and a desire to bring their faith into the office and into the workplace and into the organization. And a lot of times what happens is they come into a church, and they would come to me as a pastor, and they would start expressing that desire. And my only answer, sadly, was, well, how about you invite them to come on Sunday with and hear this?
Hmm.
And which is not a bad thing. Of course, that would be like a great invitation. But if that's like the only card you have to play, and I think that a lot of the business owners I talk to they got kind of frustrated, a little bit like irritated with the church and with the leadership, because they're like, hey, like I want to do this, and I want some help. And that's where I think Follower of One and some of these organizations that are sprouting up are coming and bringing some answers of, here's how to intentionally and strategically really step into the place that God's put you, and to bring your faith in some really real ways, some practical ways. And I think part of the success of it is it's rising up from entrepreneurs. So as much as I want to bring and share kind of, what God's taught me in this process. I'm learning a ton in this, and I've only been in this for 2 years, so there's a huge learning curve of just interacting with so many people on the platform here that can speak into that and help me get a better and better perspective of what that looks like.
Absolutely. And before we go into what the marketplace mission trip with follower of one actually is I would love to, from a standpoint of you, you're running Little Cloak, but you've also been a pastor for a large number of years. And so from your standpoint, I would love for you to first just talk about mission trips. Personally, I've been on a mission trip with Athletes in Action. I spent 3.5 weeks in the Dominican Republic doing mission work, but then also playing baseball, hence your baseball that you have in your hand right now. Whenever you think about that, you think about time and effort. You also think about fundraising. Most people that go on mission trips, they have to fundraise, and that's a huge thing. Today's time with inflation, which we're not going to go into, but just the cost of living from when I was a senior in high school is completely different than the cost of living currently sitting in 2026. Whenever you think about that, it's $3,000 to $6,000 for a mission trip. And so
Yeah.
I would love to circle that back to you as a pastor, thinking about missions and then also your scope in the marketplace. It's a lot for people to take off work. And so I'd just like to set up this framework to allow people to understand that you don't have to go somewhere to be a missionary. I love mission trips. I still talk, and I'm actually working with one of my teammates in a business venture with my teammates at Athletes in Action. So I love mission trips. I think it's highly valuable. But there are a lot of people that don't have the opportunity to go on a mission trip because of their career and their place of
Yeah.
work currently. So let's talk a little bit about follower of one. Let's talk a little bit about how you, as a pastor, think about mission trips and just creatively encourage people to not separate faith on Sunday and work on Monday.
Right. Yeah, and same similar background. I've either participated or led almost 20 different mission trips over the years, and so it's a near dear to my heart. You know, everything from South America to Europe to Africa to Asia, and so and seeing and God work incredibly. It was actually a really big part of my faith journey. Was my dad took me on a mission trip to South America when I was in ninth grade, and it was very, very formative for my faith, and specifically that stepping out of my kind of known environment and a lot of the comforts that were there, and seeing faith and the gospel at work in just a different context. It was, it is one of the things you'll hear it all the time, and you just repeat it because I think it's so true. Is we go on these mission trips to kind of impact and influence others, but really at the end of the day, we come back impacted, influenced ourselves, and our hearts are the ones that are formed and changed because we see things from a different perspective. It's one of the things that resonated. I've now been on two of the Father of One mission trips and participated in that, and it's one of the things that really resonated with me, specifically from gaining an insight into it does the same. We're doing some of the same work where you're stepping into, it's kind of weird because you're stepping into a very, very familiar space with typically when you're going into a workplace, you're stepping into very familiar relationships and interactions. And obviously there's a lot of dynamics in that your paycheck is coming from them. And so that's going to affect the way that everything relates together. But to step in with an intentionality to influence and impact your workplace with that faith that you're bringing into it. And I think that's what this is all about. It's about an intentionality. That the mission trip actually forces you to consider, forces me to think about how am I actually living this out? Because if we're honest with ourselves, I can go to work, I can go to the office, I can check in and check out, and you wake up and we're sitting here right at the beginning of the year, and you kind of look back and you're like, how did that last year go that fast? How did we get here?
Yeah.
Because we can easily just get in the spin cycle where it's just going. We're just going. I'm just checking in, I'm checking out, I'm doing the calendar. We hit this quarter, we had this, here's the P&L, here's where we're at. And it's just this constant piece. And if I don't take a moment and step back and say, okay, why am I doing this? And where are we going here? And who's God set on my heart in this workplace, and who can I be praying for, and who's someone that I can appreciate, and who's someone that I can serve. And asking ourselves some of those strategic questions, it kind of tries to pull us out of that mundane, of the familiar, which is what a traditional mission trip would do. And what happens is oftentimes you come back from one of those mission trips. I remember coming back from a mission trip in West Africa, and being in a place where you just see your world differently. And I think that that's what the Father of One mission trip does. It helps you to see your world differently and to have this new perspective and a new lens of approaching it. And so that value for me, and I'm still in ministry, and so I'm still a very part-time pastor planting a church that's here in the Charlotte area. You're just not going to be able to take that out of me. My wife and I have such a heart and burden for that. That's really, really valuable for our family and our three kids, to have a community that we're building like that. And so I get to participate in that and bring some of these new things I'm learning there. The hardest part, this is the piece for me, Addison, is like when I went on the mission trips, the hardest part for me is I work remote.
Mm.
So I don't have a ton of, I have two or three meetings a week with each of our staff and some of our team members, but I don't have a ton of FaceTime with them. And so it forced me to kind of like step back and think about that of how do I more intentionally step into the interactions I do have. I do a lot of development calls. I'm working with different organizations that we're introducing ourselves into that. Those were started to see those through that lens a little bit. How could I encourage this president of this company? What's the burden that this HR director is carrying, that, yeah, I want to introduce them to what we're doing at Little Cloak, but at the end of the day, I just really want to care for them.
Yeah.
And so that's where that mission trip process is so helpful to kind of get that stirred up a little bit and continue to remind ourselves of that.
I love that. Me personally, I work remote as well. And so going through the multiple mission trips that I've been in the faith and work space. I've worked for multiple
So Addison,
nonprofits.
that's not your background out of your back of your office. Is that like the sky there is not
You
okay? I,
know,
I didn't.
the sky is the ranch, but I actually am at the ranch. So
Oh, you're actually at the ranch this time.
for those of you that actually want to see, I do have a horse picture at the top of my screen here that are watching this on YouTube. So this is the live Drew Addison conversation. So I prefer the
Wow, this is
sunrise.
raw. This is real. Yeah.
This
I
is
oh,
raw.
I
This
love
is real.
yeah, you've told me the story of the sunrise. That's great. It's a good one.
It
So,
is it is a
but
great
you
story.
work remote too. So you're like, you know, it's a
Yeah,
it's a screen. You're
it
you're
is a
connect,
screen.
everything's through that. So it makes it a little interesting to try to do this,
Yeah.
missional minded connection, takes a lot more.
You know, it's interesting because when you live on Zoom, and this goes for any
Mhm.
employee or employer that's listening to this, whenever you're living on Zoom in the workplace, naturally you feel like you have to force the informal conversation
Right.
because you have 5 to 10 minutes, maybe, if you're
Yep.
lucky, if you work for a good organization, to just be impersonal and ad lib and have fun. Before this podcast, we were talking about baseball and locker rooms and working out, and that's fun. That brings in the humanness
Yeah.
of the relationship. And
Yep.
then now we're recording the podcast, but it's the same whenever you're in a virtual environment where you have to run meetings. And
Yeah. And that's
also,
creating the space for that, Addison, is so important.
absolutely.
So and because you know part of the reason that a lot of people go to remote or really enjoy remote is because of the efficiency of it. And I'm all for efficiency. I love efficiency, but the problem with a lot of times prioritizing efficiency is it misses connection.
Yeah.
And so if you don't prioritize connection and just like, hey, we're going to actually create space here at the front, I can't tell you how many meetings I get onto, Addison, where they're like, hey, if anybody wants to hang out afterwards, we're going to kind of hang here and chat. And I watch and it's like, boom, everybody's gone. Everybody's
Yeah.
out. And that I think, that's okay. Like that's with it, but it's a place where like we're starting to miss out on that and feel that disconnect. And those are the spaces, especially for us who are trying to bring our that space there is like lean into your faith there. And hey, how was your week? What are you doing? Let me get to know you. Let me hear a little bit about your story. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's scheduling coffee chats,
Yeah.
being intentional about the opportunity to work alongside, not just work with people in the marketplace. And also, that encourages us whenever we think about ways that we can interact with people, specifically the follower of one mission trip. Drew, I'd love for you to just unpack practically what it is we're actually talking about. But before that, I would love to just say if you do work remotely and you're listening to this, it's an opportunity for you to witness to people outside the walls of your home. Whenever you go to the grocery store or whenever you're going to the post office, you're interacting with people that you can show love to. Drew mentioned appreciating others and serving others. I think that just appreciation is holding the door open for somebody when they're right behind you instead of letting it slam in your face or slam in their face. So there are practical ways that you can be intentional about knowing and surrounding yourself with people. So, Drew, talk to us practically about what the mission trip is, your experience, and we'll continue the conversation.
Yeah. I think the big thing is it's a really, really simple guide that walks you through on, there's videos that are involved that you're watching each day. There's practical pieces that are you're handed before you show up to kind of prepare yourself for that. And then there's actually video calls that are group interactions that you get to join into. And that was kind of an interesting piece for me. When I first stepped in there, it's one of those pieces like I don't really know a lot of these people. I don't even know what this thing is that I'm doing. And so that first time was a little nerve-wracking for me of just kind of sitting and listening. But the leadership was there. They just kind of created an open space to introduce ourselves, to tell a little bit about who we are and what we're doing, and then to introduce this idea and really a focused and Mike and the leadership team there has done such a phenomenal job of just organizing a curriculum and a guide that just walks through again that intentionality of thinking through just these highlight pieces of like I'm stepping in this day and I'm thinking about this topic and I'm praying about this and here's some of the things that God's word is kind of stirring in my heart about this and so I step into that day and I'm thinking about that and then a lot of times in the evening there's some opportunities again to connect and to pray together, to share some of the stories, even to interact on sometimes there's like questions. I'm like, hey, I ran into this situation. One of the cool things for me, one of my mission trips actually happened every now and then we again, Little Cloak is completely virtual, but we get invited to national conferences for some of the companies that we partner with. And so it just so happened that my mission trip was the same week as the national conference. And so I was flying out to Las Vegas. I was there with them all week. And if there's any place that needs a mission trip, it's Las Vegas. And so go there and just a multitude of opportunities to be able to connect and interact with people who are looking for someone to talk to and looking for someone to interact with. And this is the thing that I've learned in this, Addison, is some recent studies are coming out. They're talking about, it's right around 60% of people in recent studies are saying that they have no one to talk to about their life. And these are people, I'm not just talking about people who are outside the church. I'm talking about people, this includes people who are in the church. And this was the eye-opening thing for me as someone who serves in the church and in the workplace and kind of straddles that to see there's hundreds of people that I recognize, and we see this all the time. They're a person who like you see them on a Sunday every week, and then all of a sudden you hear something like, wait, they've been going through what? And they didn't tell anyone. They don't feel like they have a space to talk to someone. And so to have those eyes to be able to see that. So that's where the practicality, I mean, again, I work from home. So when I go to the grocery, one of the things I make it a purpose to do is I don't go through self-checkout. I already interact with screens enough. I'm going to go through and I'm going to wait in line. So I'm going to wait in line for a person. And then I always try to like strike up a conversation. I hope it's not annoying. I try to be just like personable, but like, hey, how's the day going? Hey, how long's your shift going to go? You know, and I hope we can get through this one and and I live in a little bit of a smaller town outside of Charlotte, and so I'm typically seeing the same young lady that's there and just greeting her, and so hopefully she starts to recognize me and there, but it's building connection that these are real people who are walking through real life and looking for real hope kind of a thing. And so that's where and just showing I think that's the piece of this is one of the things that resonated so deeply. I shared this with you before, Addison, is like the whole thought of appreciating others. I it and this is, that goes such a long way for you to say to someone, say to one of your coworkers, to say to an employee, hey, I really appreciate you. And
Yeah.
genuinely, I don't appreciate, hey, I really appreciate what you do. Not like, I mean, I think that goes some way, that kind of like gives an attaboy to some people. But that's like, I appreciate you for what you produce, but the moment you stop producing it, I stop appreciating you. And I don't think everyone's thinking it that way, but that's what you're saying in some ways. And so that's a place where you can say, "Hey, I just appreciate you. I appreciate you. You're as a person, and to feel that appreciation." And I think that's where appreciation starts. It actually starts with seeing those these individuals you interact with, whether it's your coworkers or maybe it's a sales relationship, or maybe it's even a company that you're contracted with, to see those individuals as people, not projects. And and so appreciating them, and part of appreciating them is knowing them, is understanding them. And so one of the things that I try to do is not just like, I don't want to just tell a person, hey, I appreciate you, and they sit there like, well, what do you appreciate about me? And I'm sitting there like, well, I appreciate your blue shirt. And you're like, well, because I know if I don't know anything about them, they're gonna feel like that's really flat. They're gonna feel like there's no actual like these are. So before I can even get to that place, one of the things in my training, one of my professors just challenged us with is, he said, before you can actually care for a person, before you can actually like really connect with a person, you have to earn the passport to travel in their life a little bit.
Mm.
And I think that it was really helpful for me because I started to say, okay, well, I've been through this process. We just traveled, and I had to go get a passport, to travel into England. And so going through this process of filling out the paperwork and sending in the funds and doing the, and I had to have all this back and forth happening with, the U.S. government and everything getting placed before I got my passport. And in the same way, there's a lot of intentionality in relationships that I'm going to spend that time of, you know, tell me a little, and that's where that like, around the water cooler, even when you're online time, is so valuable. Of, when, and this is what I love about jumping on with you, Addison, is like a lot of times I know about the trips you've taken, and I know about some of the things you're passionate about, and I know about, some of the family dynamics, the good and the bad kind of things. And so when we jump on, it picks up from there in a sense of like, I have some opportunity to kind of travel in your life and to say to you then, hey, how'd that go? And then when I say I appreciate you, it means that much more. Um, and so bringing that, and that was one of the things of intentionality on my mission trips, to say I want to be able to come to the end of this week and to be able to communicate to some of the people on my team, hey, I really appreciate you. And I just thought that some of the lessons that were there, that were developed through Father of One, were really helpful in challenging that as I would say, as a spiritual practice in my life.
That's really good, Drew. And just so the record is clear, I appreciate you as well. I just-
Thank you.
you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. And my favorite
I
color is
wish
blue.
you
So thanks for the compliment about my shirt.
yeah, I wish you didn't know as much as you knew about my life, though. That's the one thing that's concerning for me.
Well, I'll pray for you. We'll pray for
Thank
each
you.
other. Yeah,
I need it. I need it. Yeah.
absolutely. It's very good, Drew. And to recap, from a standpoint of the practicality of the mission trip, it's a 2 week stint, if you will. We have a prep week. Weeks one is the prep week,
Mhm.
understanding the five principles, which Drew, you already highlighted, but I would just like to reiterate: pray, appreciate others, know what you believe, serve others, and speak for yourself in terms of, hey, let's talk about our own faith and understand what our own faith, not that you have to be belligerent in terms of speaking for yourself and being over the top vocal, but just understanding how can you stand on the solid rock foundation of your faith in the marketplace. And so that's week one. And then, as Drew was talking about, the intentionality behind that second week of the mission trip, which is really the action week of saying, hey, how can I take these five principles and just be intentional Monday through Saturday and then get refilled on Sunday? We are not at any way discounting the work that the church is
Nope.
doing. We're
Nope.
highly encouraging you to go to church and invite your friends, but know that you have. I love the analogy that you use, Drew, whenever you talk about in order to be in relationship with others, you have to have the passport into their life. And that takes time and effort. But the most important thing that we can come alongside and understand as we close out this conversation with Drew is to be intentional, number one, with your faith. I recently listened to a podcast from Craig Rochelle that was talking about if you have chaos in your life, in the inner circle, that chaos can be subsided if you focus on the spiritual first. And so I would encourage us all, coming from a conversation with a pastor, with an executive director, with somebody that has seen it from both sides, and still vulnerably said, hey, we're still learning, because there is a lot to learn when we talk about how to naturally love on people, appreciate them, and lead them to the light, right? Lead them to a better way to see their own personal life. And we have to do that in step, we have to do that in relationship. And an opportunity is with the Marketplace Mission Trip. Among all the other wonderful faith and work organizations that are out there, this encourages anybody, no matter what your logo is, to say, I'm dedicating 2 weeks to prep and take action for ways to incorporate faith into the day to day, whether we're in person or virtual. So, Drew, I would leave all of this to say, are there any last minute encouragement words or things that you would like to close us out with this morning?
Yeah, I think it's back to that, kind of what I mentioned earlier with as much as these mission trips are meant to influence and they impact others along the way. It's really about shaping and forming what's in our own hearts. And that's as I travel through other people's lives, as I get to know them and hear their stories, it forms and shapes my own. And it draws me closer to see, like, man, like look at what God's doing in their life, and look at how God's shaping. And so I think the scary piece is, there's this element of I remember, leading one of the mission trips, and I told one of the guys who was traveling with us, we were headed to South America, and said, "Hey, I'm on this night, I'm going to have you share your testimony." And he was scared out of his mind, Addison. Like, just like, I got to get up there. It's going to be through a translator. I mean, probably going to say the wrong thing, and he it was just frightening as all get out. And he got up there and he did it, and it was beautiful, and it was messy, and he was all over the place, but he found his way, and the people, and we loved it. Our team loved it. The people were so encouraged by it, and he came down, and he's just so like, that was a life-changing moment for him to step out in that. And he came out, he's like, "Hey, I gotta go home, and I gotta tell, like, my family this, and I gotta
Mm.
tell my coworkers about, like, I can share this." And it kind of spurred this confidence in him. And so I know for some people who are kind of like, hey, like, stepping into this, I'm a little nervous. Like, how's this going to go? And what's this going to be like? And am I going to screw this up? And I'm probably going to, like, make it like worse and not better. And it's no, like, the Lord just continues to use this as you step out in that faith and you start thinking, like, intentionally about these things. What it'll start to do is change in you, and you'll start to see just opportunity after opportunity to do that, to pray with others, to appreciate others, to serve others, to speak out, and to take those steps in really, really practical terms. And so it just, jump into it, and jump into it again. And because every time the mission trip happens, it's a little bit different, and I learn a little bit of a different thing about myself and about the opportunities that are there.
Amen. As you said, and as we close, be real and raw, first with yourself, with understanding
Yeah.
where you are, and then go out into the real world, which is where we all live, and be intentional. At the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. Drew, it has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Thank you, not only for the work that you're doing with Little Cloak, but the opportunity to work with you in a lot of different ways. But this specifically, Follower of One and the Marketplace Ministry. So, with that, Drew's information will be in the show notes. It has been a pleasure to have this conversation. Thank you to everybody who is listening to this Follower of One podcast. I'm your host, Addison Williams. Drew, thank you once again, and we will
Very
see
welcome.
you for the next episode. As you go, live your faith with intention. Pray, appreciate others, know what you believe, serve others, speak for yourself. These small steps shape a faithful life. Wherever God has placed you, walk it out with courage. You are a missionary.